Okay.
Miriwe, Miriwe Mwese. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the launch of the 21st edition of the Rwanda Economic Update by the World Bank Group. My name is David Tuvi, and it is an absolute pleasure to be your MC for today. We have a packed agenda ahead of us, so let's jump straight in. First and foremost, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our distinguished guests and speakers who have joined us today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules. Thank you for being with us after lunch as well, and we hope that you will enjoy the session this afternoon. We are honoured to have with us the Minister of Public Service and Labour, who will provide a keynote address. Thank you so much for being with us. We're also privileged to have Roland Price, the Country Manager of the World Bank in Rwanda, who will deliver remarks. Thank you once again for hosting us. If you're watching online, this is being live streamed, so please take note. Or you enjoy tweeting like me, please be sure to use the hashtag Rwanda Economic Update and tag World Bank Africa and Rwanda 4Dev, and that's the number 4. So that's hashtag Rwanda Economic Update. I'm sure it also works on Threads, if anyone has joined Threads in the last few days. Today we gather here to unveil the findings and insights from the 21st edition of the Rwanda Economic Update. The biannual report serves as a comprehensive analysis of Rwanda's economic performance, prospects, and policy priorities. It is designed to cater to a wide range of stakeholders, including policymakers, business leaders, market participants, analysts, and members of civil society. And I'm so pleased that so many of you have joined us from all those different groups. The current edition of the update focuses on the inclusiveness of foreign direct investment in Rwanda. It explores the impact of FDI on the domestic economy, examining areas such as employment generation, linkages with local firms, and the quality of the jobs that are being created. The report also shed light on the opportunities and challenges presented by FDI and suggests some policy measures to enhance its inclusiveness. So now let's move on to the agenda for today's event. After welcome remarks from Yolande and the keynote address from the Minister, we will have the World Bank staff present the report, providing an in-depth analysis of the findings. To summarize the report, we will also watch a short video. But don't worry, there won't be any tests afterwards. Following the presentations, we'll have a panel discussion to delve deeper into the implications of the report. Our panelists, who are experts in their respective fields, will share their perspectives and also take questions from you. So please do take note and have some questions ready for our guests. We'll welcome panelists from the Rwanda Development Board, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, Volkswagen Rwanda, and IFC. And we're very pleased that the panel discussion will be moderated by Abha Prasad, the Practice Manager at the World Bank Group. Thank you for being with us as well. Once again, welcome to the launch. Thank you. A big round of applause for Prasad. A big welcome again to the 24th edition of the Rwanda Economic Update. Let's proceed with the program and gain valuable insights in Rwanda's economic development and the inclusiveness of foreign direct investment. I now have the privilege of welcoming our first speaker, Ms. Roland Price, the Country Manager of World Bank Rwanda. With her extensive experience in economic development and her leadership overseeing the World Bank's operations in Rwanda, Roland brings a wealth of knowledge and insights. Please make her feel welcome.
Miriweneza guests and friends, Honorable Fanfan Wayindo, Minister of Public Services and Labour, Philip Lucky, Acting Investment Officer of the Rwanda Development Board, Ms. Delphine Uwasi, Acting Head of Strategy and Competitiveness Department at the Rwanda Development Board, Mr. Serge Kamuhinda, CEO of Volkswagen, Dr. Patrick Hitayezu, Chief Economist at the Minecofin, Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, Dr. Thierry Kalisa, Chief Economist at the National Bank of Rwanda. We also have with us this afternoon ambassadors from the EU, from Sweden, from Zimbabwe, from Mali, and others. It's wonderful to look out at this audience and see the diverse group of interested persons that we have managed to bring together here today. Distinguished private sector representatives, distinguished government representatives, colleagues from development partner agencies, esteemed guests and friends, all protocol observed. I am delighted to welcome you to the 21st edition of the Rwanda Economic Update. Among other things, I am very, very pleased. This is one of the very last things that I will be doing in country as country manager for the World Bank Rwanda. And it's wonderful to be able to do it in person with so many of you, because for the first 4 of these during my time, it was only online and we didn't have the benefit of this interaction. So I'm extremely pleased to be here. This update is a flagship publication for the World Bank Rwanda. It's published twice a year, and as David mentioned, it analyzes recent economic developments and prospects and provides an in-depth examination of selected economic and policy issues of priority for Rwanda. The current edition has a special focus on inclusiveness of foreign direct investment, and essentially it provides considerable value in our view, as this is the first comprehensive study on the effect of foreign direct investment on the quality of jobs in Rwanda. The World Bank has prepared this report in very close collaboration with government, in particular the Rwanda Development Board and the Rwanda Revenue Authority. We're also grateful for the contribution of the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, the National Bank of Rwanda, and the National Institute of Statistics. The data and comments and insights provided by these institutions have helped us to make the analysis even more robust and has helped us to shape the recommendations. My colleagues will follow with a very detailed analysis and an explanation of what are the challenges and how it is that we got to the findings of the report. But allow me to bring you a few key messages. In the first quarter of 2023, Rwanda's economy continued to show a strong momentum by growing at about 9%, which is a little bit more than the 8.2% recorded overall for 2022. This growth was supported mainly by the services sectors and was accompanied by a significant improvement in the labor market. However, the floods in early May of 2023, which resulted in significant loss of life and destruction of infrastructure, are likely to impact the growth momentum and growth overall in 2023. In the first half of 2023, inflation started declining from unprecedented high levels in 2022, but unfortunately, it still remains high, and this is driven mostly by rising food prices. Foreign direct investment plays a critical role in Rwanda's economy. Stimulated by a favorable regulatory environment and international treaties to protect foreign investors, FDI flows have been the main sources of private investment in the Rwandan economy. At their peak, the share of FDI inflows in investment was almost 20%. FDI has also had a substantial impact on employment. FDI firms, firms that are here because of foreign direct investment, created 170% more jobs than domestic firms. These jobs tend to be high-quality jobs, as FDI firm employees are 11 percentage points more likely to have Social Security as part of their employment package as compared with their peers in domestic firms. FDI also contributes to business in Rwanda. The sales of these firms are approximately 370% larger when compared to domestic private firms, and FDI firms have strong connections with local firms. But while FDI firms play a significant role in employment generation in Rwanda, the jobs are concentrated in a few sectors, and in these sectors, both women and youth are less likely to benefit. Moreover, FDI projects tend to be concentrated in Kigali and surrounding districts, which have much lower poverty rates than the national average. In general, FDI tends to occur in geographic areas where the level of poverty is relatively low. And so we care about poverty, we care about whether women and whether youth are getting jobs when we talk about the inclusiveness of FDI. The main finding of the report is that going forward, there's a need for a concentrated effort to improve the impact of FDI on inclusiveness in Rwanda. The report suggests areas where policy initiatives by the government could improve the impact of FDI on growth and development. For example, encouraging FDI in areas outside of Kigali, in areas where poverty rates are higher. This could have a significant increase in the impact on poverty reduction. To do this, one would look to assess the factors that underlie successful FDI projects in poorer regions. And one approach could be to create special economic zones with availability of higher quality infrastructure and human capital in poorer districts of Rwanda. And we understand that this is very much in line with the government's current plans. Modifying the incentive framework to encourage investments in women-led startups is another approach or another initiative that the government could carry out. These include provisions of ancillary services that generate greater female employment. So childcare, for example. We know that if children are taken care of, the women at work, women are more likely to come to work because childcare is where a lot of women spend their time. And if, for example, working hours were more flexible, women would have an opportunity to carry out their care work and then perhaps later come into the office or into the firms. Expansion of training for both women and youth. Investment in sectors that tend to employ more casual workers, which is an important source of employment for women in Rwanda. Also, thinking about encouraging foreign firms to enhance their corporate social responsibility initiatives to support better working conditions and better health and safety conditions in the workplace. Another initiative would be strengthening the monitoring and ex post assessment of foreign direct investment. We believe that this would help to contribute to evaluating the incentives regime and improve government policies towards FDI. We could think also again of improving the linkages between FDI projects and domestic suppliers. We've already said that there is a strong linkage between FDI and domestic businesses, but this could be improved. And this would require a more in-depth assessment of the linkages between FDI and domestic firms using an expanded database, which would help identify how different types of FDI firms affect domestic firms and the districts they are located in, thus providing a robust basis for developing more detailed policy-level recommendations. There are things that the government could do we would say, that are further afield. And one of these would be cooperating with the home governments of investors to encourage more sustainable FDI projects through the imposition of mandatory standards that are enforced in the home country of investors. I say all of this to say, and I have to talk a little bit about what the bank is already doing in support of inclusiveness of FDI in Rwanda. The World Bank is implementing the Commercialization and De-risking for Agriculture Transformation project that encourages the involvement of foreign direct investment and locally linked firms to increase their participation in the agriculture sector. The project aims at increasing the use of irrigation and commercialization among producers and agribusiness firms in supported value chains. And it also looks to increase access to agricultural finance. Accessing finance is one of the significant barriers we have found in other research. The World Bank is also implementing the second Access to Finance for Recovery and Resilience project, with the objective to increase access to finance and support recovery and resilience of businesses across multiple sectors, these businesses affected by COVID-19. Both local firms and firms that are in Rwanda based upon foreign direct investment are able to access resources from these funds. And the funds essentially capitalize the Economic Recovery Fund of the government. We just recently did an additional financing of $100 million to those funds, the first having been disbursed very quickly because there was such high demand. The World Bank is also preparing a development policy operation that will support the government of Rwanda in the implementation of a new reform agenda to stimulate green, private sector-led growth driven by fair competition, inclusive access to finance, sustainable trade, and investment. This is based upon three broad program objectives. First, to increase inclusive private sector participation and growth. Second, to strengthen the regulatory environment to attract green foreign investment and stimulate regional trade. And lastly, to promote fiscal sustainability through climate finance and sustainable public investment. I would also like to say that this is the first in the series of analytical work that the World Bank will do that has a stronger focus on jobs. This is a report that, as I mentioned, focuses on the quality of jobs from foreign direct investment. We're also working on a country economic memorandum where we are looking to update the future drivers of growth. Many of you who are familiar with the World Bank's output will know that this is a product which we disseminated in 2020, and it looks at Rwanda, it was very much a strong input to the government's Vision 2050. The update takes into account sort of what has happened post-COVID, but it brings in two new elements for research, one being climate and the second being jobs. And I'm happy to say that we are going to follow this work with a jobs study, which is a deep dive on jobs in Rwanda. What are the challenges and what can be done differently and better by government to be able to produce more quality jobs? And we're doing that in partnership with the MasterCard Foundation. So I've spoken a lot. Many persons who are much better at this will come after me. And of course, one of those are the Honorable Minister Fanfan, who is, I've had the opportunity to speak with her. She's very passionate on both sides of her work, on public services and on labor. She's going to come and give us the government's perspective on quality jobs in Rwanda. We're very excited that you're able to join us today, Honorable Minister. Please, I welcome you to the podium.
Thank you, Roland. Dear Roland Price, Country Manager of the World Bank in Rwanda, dear representative of international organizations, embassies, public and private institutions, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my great pleasure and honor to be with you today on this auspicious occasion of launching the 21st edition of the Rwanda Economic Update with a focus on inclusiveness of foreign direct investment, FDI. Sorry. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to all stakeholders involved in making this initiative a reality. I would like to thank the World Bank in Rwanda for significantly contributing to Rwanda's economic growth journey, and in particular for its efforts to consistently support analyzing Rwanda's economic development and prospect, as well as policies priority up to this 21st edition we are launching today. This year's edition reveals that the large size of foreign direct investment inflows were encouraged by a favorable regulatory environment and improvement in governance, which resulted into significant employment benefits, both in terms of higher quality jobs than domestic firms in terms of access. However, foreign direct investment projects tend to be concentrated in Kigali and surrounding districts, which have much lower poverty rates than the national average. In my view, today's dialogue on the current Rwanda's Economic Update edition on maximizing the positive impact of FDI comes at the right time, as it will facilitate exchange of experiences on policies, strategies, and incentives to further encourage multinational enterprises to invest and subsequently promote more and better jobs in our country. It is worth mentioning that FDI contributes most effectively to achieving sustainable development when it maximizes the creation of more and better jobs. Investors can actively seek to expand their backwards and forward linkages with local enterprises, support the improvement of working conditions and inclusion of vulnerable groups, and contribute more broadly to sustainable enterprise development. In today's interconnected world, each country is increasingly looking to investors to make such positive contribution to economic and social development, and this can be possible through addressing the scale of the challenges hindering investment. These challenges include legal and regulatory barriers, especially investment approval processes, which might commonly obstruct multinational companies' affiliates' operations once not properly addressed. Today's Rwanda Economic Update is a sign of the significant efforts in investment and business reforms that have helped to overcome the said challenges, starting from visible to invisible barriers of trade, which could not be possible without the political will to renew the focus on making business-friendly reforms by simplifying approval processes and removing limits on FDI, among other areas. It also reaffirms the importance of government efforts to strengthen institutions, property rights, and financial products, seeking to boost foreign direct investment and other incentives tailored to easing foreign investors' needs, including post-entry issues such as business-friendly environment and advocacy. In addition to that, the government of Rwanda has worked tirelessly to put in place the following business-friendly policies: free charge online business registration and within 6 hours, one-stop center for investors with dedicated investment acceleration and aftercare team, duty-free import of machinery and input within East Africa community. As portrayed by the report we are launching today, FDI is an important source of finance for economic development and contributes to domestic employment, capital formation, and diffusion of external knowledge to the local economy. Indeed, if it is to list benefit of FDI, the list can be long, but let me emphasize on employment and job creation. It has contributed to the creation of direct, indirect, and induced jobs, which contributed to our national strategy for transformation, NST1, target of creating 214,000 jobs every year within the overall target of 1.5 million jobs in 7 years that have started in 2017 and will end with next year in 2024. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, investing for development is good, but it's better if it is pro-employment. As we launch inclusiveness of FDI in Rwanda, I would like to recommend, where possible, to prioritize pro-employment investment. Inclusiveness means creating opportunities for all. In line with investment and employment promotion, this requires to promote and empower youth as future workforce, foster skills development, and enhance social protection measures. As we attract investors, the government of Rwanda is committed to creating an enabling environment for increasing foreign direct investment that results into more and better job creation for economic development. Today's launch is a significant milestone in our journey towards a more inclusive Rwanda. I am confident by embracing inclusiveness, the government of Rwanda will not only attract more foreign and direct investment, but also foster sustainable and equitable growth. In conclusion, I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to all stakeholders who have contributed to the realization of this initiative. I thank you all for your presence here today. It is a concrete demonstration of your commitment to inclusive development. I look forward to witnessing the positive impact of our collective effort and the transformative power of inclusiveness, investment in driving Rwanda's economic prosperity. Thank you, and may this launch be the beginning of a new era of continuous promotion of inclusive and pro-employment foreign direct investment in Rwanda. I wish you all a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, for those enlightening remarks and for also emphasizing the importance of pro-job creation and pro-employment foreign direct investment. Can we please give the Minister another round of applause? Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin the next segment of the event, I would like to acknowledge and welcome some special guests who have joined us from Washington, D.C. We have Mr. Sajjad Ali Shah, the Development Effectiveness Manager at the World Bank. we have Mr. Vinaya Swarup, the Economic Advisor at the World Bank, and as mentioned earlier, Ms. Abra Prasad, the Macroeconomic Trade and Investment Practice Manager at the World Bank. And we also have Zano Mataruka, who is the IFC representative. Please make them feel welcome as well. We will now proceed to the presentation of the 21st edition of the Rwanda Economic Update. The report represents a comprehensive analysis of Rwanda's economic performance, prospects, and policy priorities. It is the result of extensive research and collaboration between the World Bank Group and the government of Rwanda. I am delighted to introduce Peace Niyibizi from the World Bank, who will present the findings of the report. The expertise and dedication of the World Bank team have been instrumental in producing such a valuable resource. Through this presentation and analysis, we will gain a deeper understanding of Rwanda's economic landscape, the impacts of recent challenges, and the opportunities and challenges presented by FDI. Please join me in welcoming Peace. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, all protocol observed, good afternoon. As Ron said, we are delighted to welcome you to this launch of the 21st edition of Rwanda Economic Update with a special focus on inclusiveness of FDI in Rwanda. So before I start the presentation, I would like to acknowledge the entire team that contributed to this Rwanda Economic Update. Especially, I would like to acknowledge the presence of my co-author, Calvin Zebaze, who is also the lead author of this Rwanda Economic Update. Also like to acknowledge the collaboration we had with European University of Institute from Italy. They have extensively contributed to the special focus of this report. We have also someone who works in our back called Philip Schuler, who always try to help us on structuring the message and all guidance from him. Those are the element team. So in this presentation will be about two parts. The first one will be before. It will be about the Rwanda Economic Update. We'll be talking about the recent economic update, what happened the first month of this year, building on what happened in 2020. Because last time, 2022, last time we had the Rwanda Economic Update, we do not have the full year 2022. It was in February this year. We also have the second part about talking about the benefit of FDI in Rwanda in terms of inclusiveness. So now let us start with the recent economic development. As Ron said, we had a strong growth in the first quarter. This happened after 2 years of recovery from COVID. Remember, in 2021, we had almost 7% growth, and last year we had 8.2. If we do an average of last 2 years, plus the first quarter of this year will be above the average we had before COVID. Before COVID, like 5 years before the COVID, the average was 7.5%. You could see we still have a strong momentum, I would say a strong recovery from the COVID period. This growth was mainly fueled by the strong consumption. As we said, there has been strong inflation in 2022, but because of labor condition improvement, because of some jobs, especially from the tourism sectors, the consumption held up. On the supply side, mostly the growth was driven by the services, especially the so-called contact service, sensitive services, which are trade, hotels, and transport. Remember, those three sectors that were mostly the ones hit by COVID in 2020 and started recovering in 2021. Since 2022, there has been holding up the growth. So, as Ron mentioned, that strong momentum faced some setback, especially in the second quarter in May 2023, when Rwanda was hit by heavy rains, and we had some floods and landslide in south, western, and northern provinces, and we had some loss of lives 136. We have some people who are left homeless. We had some damages in infrastructures, and we have even some crops and livestock being damaged. So we estimate that if there's no timely responses, this could have an impact on what was expected to grow, the expected growth in 2023. But we know government has deployed a timely response, and we know that government will continue to do so. But we estimate that if there were not that timely responses, we could have like less than 0.4 less than what was expected in 2023. Inflation, which was a big challenge in 2022, started coming back, but it is still high. It is still above the National Bank target, which is 8%, but we have seen over the last 2 months, I would say May and June, it started coming down, especially the core inflation, which exclude the food prices. So as you can see, is in June was around 9%, and we hope that it continue to go down as we see food prices also going down. So other news that happened before the flood was how the government debt started declined for the first time since 2013. This was mostly driven by the fiscal policy that Rwanda deployed over the last fiscal year that ended in June. And from the statistic available, we have seen that Rwanda has cut its expenditure almost 4% of GDP, especially in terms of some inefficient capital spending, subsidies, and some use of goods. If we call where government said that are going to replace some use of services and goods by using IT material so that they can be able to cut some expenditure which are deemed unnecessary, and they help the government to cut back its debt. So the result paid off. We have seen, as I said, the public debt declining for the first time since 2013. As that graph on right is showing, like the response of COVID between 2019 and 2020, the public debt government increased by more than 15% like in 1 year. That was mostly due to the response that government deployed to mitigate the impact of COVID, the health, social, and economic recovery that the government deployed. But because of this effort to narrow its deficit and even the growth impact, we have seen that for the first time since 2013, in 2022, the debt declined. This is my presentation for the first part. Now I'll go straight to special focus of this report, which is the inclusiveness of FDI in Rwanda. So the presentation will be focusing on 5 issues. I'll be starting with showing some macro patterns, how not only FDI is also important to macroeconomics. Also I'll talk about the job and the quality of job, the inclusiveness, and some recommendation that help on improving on inclusiveness. So we got, as the Lord said, we got collaboration. We have collaboration from several institutions, from government to do this work, especially we got some FDI register from RDB, we got tax base from Rwanda Revenue Authority, we got some data from the National Bank and double surveys, and even we got some poverty numbers from statistics. So I would add my voice to Roland's to appreciate the collaboration we always have with those institutions in availing data that could allow us to do some rigorous analysis. So let me start with some patterns on macro impact of FDI. As we said, there have been substantial increases in FDI, especially over the last 15 years, when the level of FDI moved from less than 1% in 2006 to peak peaked to almost 6% in 2014, and currently, with impact of COVID, we are at 2.5% in 2022. But I would say that from the low level we had in 2020, FDIs are increasing in Rwanda. So FDI has played a big role in financing investment, as Rand said. Like when we have the peak of FDI in 2014, they were representing almost 25 of investment in Rwanda. That is a huge contribution. On average, if I look at the last 10 years from to 2022, the average is almost 22% of investment in Rwanda. Also, the FDI plays another important role, as I said, for investment. So when investment comes in Rwanda, they need import. They need to import some materials. And therefore, we have the current account widening. The current account is the difference between what we export and what we import. So FDI also is like an important source, an important financing option for the current account deficit. Is the third after two sources but that are mostly public sector oriented, that is the borrowing and the capital account. So as everyone mentioned, that huge inflow of FDI was mostly linked to improve the regulatory framework in Rwanda. And as this graph shows, you can see that Rwanda has improved over the last 15 years. And some of the variables, some of the institutional type, like rule of law, control of corruption, we have even exceeded the level of Eastern Asia countries. And we know those countries, in East Asian countries, they have been receiving a lot of FDI. So we hope that also Rwanda could continue to attract FDIs. So their sources are quite concentrated. We mostly receive FDI when we look at the project. They're from China, India, and United States. When you look at the projects registered over like 6 years, mostly they're coming from 3 countries, and they represent almost 40% of the total project registered. In terms of values, those 3 represent 36%. But if you look at the right-hand figure, the 3 like China, United States, and United Kingdom, they represent almost 50% in terms of dollars of all FDI that are coming to Rwanda. So when it comes to job creation, as Roland and the Honorable Minister mentioned, FDI are important source of employment generation, and we estimate that they employ more, like 170 more jobs, if on average, if you compare to the job in domestic farms. But those jobs are concentrated in a few sectors, like looking at the time period that we analyzed, like the last 6 years, we saw that most of the jobs are in manufacturing, which represent more than 70% of the jobs created. The prevalence of manufacturing is mostly driven in some few companies that generated almost 5,000 jobs in the last 5 years. So, but we can see construction also is the second, and some real estate. So, the job that FDI creates does not happen immediately. They happen over time. And we have realized that the peak is mostly after the 3rd year. And some of the sectors, as we're going to see in the next slide, it doesn't even reach the 3rd year because they disappear next the downside 3 years. So as I said, manufacturing is the most persistent and most payable and the long-lasting employment generated by FDI, they tend to last more than 3 years. But when you look at the construction, they're generated within 24 hours, like 12 to 24 months, and they start declining. I think that is the nature of the construction industry. Because if, for instance, I start a road or like a hotel, as soon as the hotel is finished, also the employment finishes. So, and the same trend was observed also in the real estate and agriculture. From this slide, you can, the main takeaway would be that manufacturing sector is the one that creates more jobs and long-lasting jobs. But the other three, which are the main sectors that we have seen jobs, the short-term jobs. So the other concern maybe is that when we compared the data that FDI has provided at the registration and what is available now in the current pay as you earn, we asked that the job created are less than what was expected, and this across the board. Some companies, we have to acknowledge that some companies have far exceeded what they have pledged, but on average, the performance are not good. Especially you could see, like when you look at over time, like in less than 6 months, you can see there are few companies above the red line. Red line means that they are matching between what I've pledged and what I've created. So there are few, but as long as we increased like a year ahead, like 1 year ahead, you could see that there are a lot of companies that realize their target. But in general, you look at like a period of analysis, there are few that achieve their target. So we looked what would be the gap across the main sectors, that the gap between what was pledged and what was created. We have seen the overall 45% is the gap, but we have seen some sectors like real sector, the gap is large. But the first two, like construction and manufacturing, the gap is not that much, especially construction, but we know construction jobs are short-term because of the nature of the industry. So when it comes to quality, we said FDI generate more quality jobs compared to domestic enterprise, because workers in our FDI farms are likely to have subscription for social security more than the ones in domestic farm. They have chance, a different percentage chance to have more the package that include the social security than they appear in domestic farms. And also we realized when we look at the contribution, because maybe the FDI jobs are well paid, the contribution of FDI to farm to social security is almost 3 times larger than a domestic farm, which means not only the good quality and also the high paid to some extent. So, well, the next point I'm going to talk is about inclusiveness of FDI, as Ron and Honorable Minister said, especially in terms of jobs and how they're spread across the country. So, when I look at the distribution across sectors, we can see that mostly are in construction, which is the nature of short-term employment. So we know over the last 10 to 5 years, construction has actively played a role in Rwanda's economy, but we know that their jobs are short-term because of the nature of the industry. So I would say FDI are concentrated in a few sectors, and most of those jobs are short-term basis. So the other issue that we have seen is like FDI tend to locate in an area which are less poorer. I would say district and less poorer. I would say in general, when you look at the first graph on the right, they are more concentrated in Kigali and the surrounding district, especially Rwamagana, I would say in eastern and some in our southern, but mostly is a district with less poverty rate and district that are surrounding Kigali. Maybe one cause of those, apart from Kigali, those district has the special economic zone, which they have infrastructure, could attract them in those districts. On the right side, we could see that we try to look at if the change, if maybe change in FDI had happened in those districts. So the same figure also try to show us that mostly FDI goes in Kigali and surrounding district. So among other fundings, we found that FDI creates job indirectly by stimulating job in the district that they're operating in, and also they have more educated workers, and through their linkage with domestic farm, they do stimulate those farms to create jobs. And unfortunately, we did not find a positive impact on employment of female and youth through the employment generated by FDI. So in terms of recommendation, I think this will be challenging given that Roland has extensively elaborated on them. So I'll try to summarize them, but Roland has elaborated them on that. So the first recommendation we are talking about, we said Rwanda will continue to boost FDI. We said Rwanda has already has laid the foundation. Rwanda has a good regulatory environment. Rwanda is participating in several international treaties and trade agreements. We said that Rwanda could leverage on those existing foundation and attract more FDI. So while attracting more of those FDI, Rwanda also has to set some background, like some foundation in other districts, especially the poorer districts, so that we can have also some FDI in those districts. As we said, when FDI environment is establishes in a district, we could see there's an impact on job creation overall. So we always also said that we could encourage promotion of women and youth through all incentives that government provide. Also, they could do a way of providing to FDI farm so that it can have greater promotion of youth. So it will be hard to go through one by one, but as I said, Roland has extensively elaborated on this one. So I will finish my presentation and just highlight 5 things that could be our main takeaway in this presentation. So the first one is that because of good and strong environment institutional framework, there have been huge FDI inflows in Rwanda in the last 15 years. So we saw that FDI is a major source of employment, indirectly and directly, but we still see that not at the expected levels. We have seen that the gap is almost 45% if you compare what was pledged and what was created on average, because I have to acknowledge that some companies achieve beyond their target, but on average, we still have a problem. So when we compare to domestic farms, we said they have, this in terms of quality of jobs, they do generate good jobs if you compare to domestic farm, as the workers have more chance of getting social security subscription. So FDI tends to locate in Kigali and surrounding districts with much lower poverty, and this is mostly not good for Rwanda because, as we said, FDI tend to reduce poverty when they do establish in a district through the job creation. So from the policy recommendation, we say there's room for further improvement on inclusiveness of FDI in Rwanda. Thank you for your attention, and we hope to see you with the next Rwanda Economic Update, will be the 22nd edition, maybe next year in February and January.
Thank you so much, Peace, for such a comprehensive presentation on the report. Can we please give Peace, Calvin, and the entire team a big round of applause? To ensure that the findings of the report are inclusive and accessible to everyone, we've prepared a short video. So please turn your attention to the screens as the technical team plays a short video which summarizes a little bit of what Peace has told us. Thank you, team. And in the meantime, feel free to scan the QR code. It will take you directly to the report. Thank you so much to the team for putting together that video. A reminder that if you are on social media or you are watching online, please feel free to use the hashtag Rwanda Economic Update, tag World Bank Africa, and also Rwanda for Dev. It's now time to delve deeper into the implications of the Rwanda Economic Update and engage in a thought-provoking discussion. We have assembled a distinguished group of experts who will share their insights and perspectives on inclusive FDI in Rwanda. Moderating this discussion, as I mentioned earlier, is Ms. Abha Prasad, the Macroeconomic Trade and Investment Practice Manager at the World Bank. I encourage all of you to participate actively in the discussion. Think about your questions and pose them to the panelists. They're smart people, they can take tough questions, so don't be scared. Let us engage in a meaningful discussion and explore ways to enhance the effectiveness of inclusive FDI in Rwanda. Please make Prasad and the rest of the panelists feel welcome. Over to you, Prasad. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So, good afternoon to everyone. Honorable Minister, distinguished guests, my esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a great pleasure to be here today to moderate this panel discussion, especially with such high level and people with such strategic influence on Rwanda. So I'm truly honored and delighted to be here today. And I have the very pleasant task of introducing the panelists to you. And I have been told by my team that given the specific topic, we shall be introducing from the private sector side to the government side, which is usually the opposite of what we do. So my pleasure today to introduce to you all Delphine. Delphine Ovase, who is the acting head of the Strategy and Competitiveness Department at the Rwanda Development Board. Prior to this, she was an entrepreneur in Nairobi, Kenya, and has over 7 years of experience in various areas such as project and people's management, SME support, and business development. Delphine holds an executive master's degree in business administration from Strathmore University Business School, which is a partner of the IESC Business School of Barcelona, Spain, and has a Bachelor's of Arts degree in economics from Guilford College, North Carolina, USA. So welcome to Delphine. And then a very warm welcome to Serge Kamuhinda, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Volkswagen Mobility Solutions Rwanda. Serge is passionate about ideas enabling Africa to leapfrog traditional development stages, and I think that's something really welcome here. Previously, Serge worked in various positions in the government. Let's give him a warm welcome too. And now to Dr. Patrick Hitaizu. He's the government's chief economist at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning of Rwanda. Before joining the ministry, Patrick was a director in the research department at the National Bank of Rwanda. He has also worked in academia and has served as a board member for several organizations in the public and private sectors, including the Rwanda Development Board. He holds a PhD in agricultural economics, and his research interest centers around economic development and policy analysis. So big welcome to him. And then Dr. Thierry Kalisa, who is the chief economist and executive director, monetary policy and research directorate at the National Bank of Rwanda, which is Rwanda's central bank. His work covers monetary policy formulation, economic research modeling, among other things. And prior to this appointment, Dr. Kalisa was senior economist, head of the macroeconomic policy division at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. He graduated from the University Lyon at France with a PhD in economics and has been teaching for various economic courses which span his teaching experience. So very warm welcome to you too. And last but not the least is my friend and colleague, Mr. Zano Maturuka, who is the IFC's resident representative in Rwanda and Uganda. He leads IFC's investment and advisory work in the two countries to deepen the IFC's impact around key sectors such as food security, climate adaptation, financial inclusion, and infrastructure development. And Zano is a Zimbabwean by nature. So, or shall I say, by nationality. So thank you so much, and really, as I must stress again, I'm very privileged to be here today. And since we had the Zano, who's from Zimbabwe, my first question will be on inflation, but not to you, Zano. The question is to Dr. Thierry. We know that inflation is coming down, but it remains high in the region and is at historical levels. How has the National Bank of Rwanda been trying to deal with high inflation pressures over the last 12 months? Are there specific measures to help vulnerable households that are most affected by these high food prices, given that the recent floods have also affected the crops? We'd be very happy to hear your views on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As it was presented by Peace earlier, we've seen inflation increasing rapidly last year. Since the mid of the year, and actually it's even at the beginning of the year with the war in Ukraine, which started in February. So inflation peaked at around 21.7% in November 2022 before starting to decline. Latest numbers we have, as she showed, is 13.7% in June, which is a good sign because inflation was coming from a very high level and going down, especially core inflation, that's inflation excluding food and energy. So what did the central bank do? It was a combination of shocks. These are two supply shocks. One is external. The other one is on the agriculture side that has affected, mainly coming from climate change. So the central bank focus has been to look at how these shocks are affecting inflation in a sustained way. So that's what we call the second round impact. So how are other prices that are not necessarily food or energy being affected by this inflation? So trying to monitor that, the central bank decided from February last year, actually quite early, to start increasing central bank rates. Cumulatively, it increased the central bank rate from 4.5% in February last year to 7% February this year. And most recently, it was maintained at 7%. So basically, the tightening of monetary policy is to limit, we can't completely outset, but limit the impact of these shocks on the core inflation on most of the products that Rwandans are consuming. So the reason why more recently it has been maintained is that we see inflation going down, the trend continuing, and if this continues the same way, we might go back to the inflation band that the central bank is targeting between 2 and 8% by the end of this year. So as you said, there's been the impact of the flood. The report is also talking about that. It's quite difficult to measure directly what it will be on overall economic situation and food inflation in particular, but we see that it has had an impact overall, destroying infrastructure, destroying crops, and of course, the first and foremost, destroying lives. So I believe that as the National Bank of Rwanda focusing on monetary policy, we will keep on monitoring what is happening, and again, seeing if there is any second round effects from this shock, working together with the Ministry of Finance to look at what can be done at the overall macroeconomic level for macro policy and demand management policies. But more specifically, I know the government is doing a lot of things in terms of reconstruction, resettlement, and so on, and that would maybe be more other institutions to talk about. But these are already there, and a plan is being done. So what we do is basically coordinate with other institutions to make sure that everything can be done on time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we cannot, not stress the role of coordination with monetary and fiscal policy. That's really key, especially in an environment when inflation is sort of going up and how to control it. With that, let me turn to Patrick. So Dr. Patrick, for the first time in 10 years, Rwanda has experienced a decline in public debt due to the strong growth and fiscal consolidation. Congratulations for that. And we know that previous increases were mainly linked to growth financing, especially in public investment. What is the government's strategy to maintain the public debt sustainability going forward, at the same time ensure that the economy continues growing?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the very simple question, and yet with a very, very complex answer. So I will try to navigate through the answer very briefly. Yes, you are very right. The total public debt has decreased from 73.4% in 2021 to 67.1% of GDP in 2022. And that was against an initial projection that we had of around 71%. So indeed, your question is touching directly on the core of the activities at the Ministry of Finance, especially in the economic planning, because it speaks directly to our fiscal framework. And our fiscal framework, what it aims to achieve is keeping debt at a sustainable level and also preserving the needed fiscal space to implement our development priorities. So the debt anchor plays a pivotal role in guiding this fiscal framework, the convergence to the anchor of 65% of GDP, nominal debt to GDP is expected by 2030. So how are we, or how do we intend to achieve that? Is, as you rightly said, is through a credible fiscal consolidation that will preserve the fiscal space through a growth-friendly domestic revenue mobilization and a spending rationalization strategy. So not only that, but we also aim to stay on the course of fiscal reforms to increase transparency, efficiency of public financial management, efficiency of public investment management, and also obviously enhance fiscal risk management. First, starting from the spending rationalization, obviously spending rationalization goes hand in hand with efficiency of government services and also the general reforms to improve our public financial management and public investment management. In that area, we are seeing efficiency gains in the digitalization of the delivery of some public goods and services. We have also started to implement our public investment management reforms that are under the public investment management assessment that was done, that was conducted by the fund last year. And those reforms aim at improving or promoting greater value for money based on proper selection, proper prioritization, and execution of public investment projects. The expenditure overall is anticipated to decline by 3.4% of GDP in the last financial year and 1.8% of GDP in the current financial year as we limit growth in spending. We also aim to publish a spending rationalization strategy as part of our next year's BFP, Budget Framework Paper. Now, on the domestic revenue mobilization, the Revenue Authority has improved its administrative efficiency significantly with the implementation of the new operating model this year, which was derived from improved focus on digitalization and compliance, improvement plans for special sector, and also the improved EBM program should see some widening of the tax base by including the informal sector. We are also preparing MTRS2 actually starting from tomorrow, which will propose a package of revenue generating and predominantly tax policy measures to mobilize more revenue. Now, on the management of fiscal risk, which is an equally important component in our fiscal framework, we are regularly quantifying and monitoring our fiscal risk, especially from SOEs, with Mininvest conducting SOE health checks and stress test exercises. And also our Fiscal Risk Committee regularly publishes key vulnerabilities and mitigation measures in the fiscal risk statement on the Minecofin website. Now, lastly, on the strengthening and reporting, the strengthening of the reporting and the transparency of public resources, we have expanded the coverage of GFS 14 reporting following the publication of quarterly budget execution report under the GFS 14 for the whole general government, which includes RSSB. We have also launched an electronic reporting portal for the beneficial ownership disclosure to the Registrar General, and a draft company partnership law capturing beneficial ownership information was also approved by the Parliament. So that is how I can summarize our strategy to continuously improve our debt management while preserving some fiscal space to implement our development priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that, because I think at the same time, while you talk of fiscal consolidation, reducing debt, you don't want to bypass growth. That's equally important. And it's important that you're retaining that fiscal space to ensure that you have some growth enhancing reforms, be it on transparency, PFM, etc. Thank you so much. So with that, let me switch gears and turn to Serge. The report says that FDI firms have contributed significantly to employment and high quality jobs and domestic, rather than what the domestic companies do. However, the number of jobs generated seemed to be a fraction of what was initially projected when registering with the RDB. And we saw that in the chart with the 45-degree line and how many of them sort of were below the line. Is there any constraint that prevents these FDI firms to realize the targeted job creation? And perhaps you could give us the case of Volkswagen and what you saw in that case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just want to mention 3 points that talk to this topic of job creation and inclusiveness. The first point would be upskilling. And the second point would be the market size and the size of the workforce. And the last point would be industrial policy making. So on the first point, more on the short term, I think also there could be an issue of the period of assessment. It is a period of crisis that we're all undergoing. However, I think from our experience, the issue of job creation and also job retention occurs very much more into lower skilled area as opposed to high skilled area. We have not had a big challenge to fill up positions of university graduates, for example. We've gone as far even as sending some colleagues to other parts of Africa. But in the low skilled area, there's a big problem of work attitude and retention on the job. And I think here we can work together to do a mass certification whereby if you are doing a certain job, you can have a certification, and we can work with government so that those certifications reflect the work ethics that are required. And I think it's a low-hanging fruit for all areas, and a simple intervention in terms of regulation whereby it has started, for example, you cannot hire an electrician unless it is a certified one. This would create and sustain jobs. So on the short term, I think that could be useful. On a midterm issue, I think there was a topic of geographical inclusiveness. FDI will not solve structural problems like problems of logistics. If you are asking an FDI to invest where I'm coming from in the southern province, there will be an issue of logistics. You would find that 27% of the population is the youth we're talking about. 45% of the total population in Rwanda are actually children. So you're talking about the 7%, which you have also to check where they live. And there is, until now, an assumption we all had in Rwanda that we have to diversify and put special economic zones everywhere in the country. I've come to be a bit more dubitative about it because we are fragmenting the market as well. And we are fragmenting the workforce as well. If you look at the 1.4 million people in Kigali, and you look every district in Rwanda, 300,000 people, and again, 45% of them are children, and you want to put special economic zones there, we must look at the structural issues there as well, not to talk about the purchasing power in those districts, not to talk about the logistics cost. So we really need to look at it from a structural perspective and understand whether we should direct FDI in a different kind of manner. I can give an example. We have our plant in the special economic zone, but we signed recently with the Ministry of Agriculture an MOU to establish a modern farm in Bugesera district, whereby we will install or we'll put a modern farm with electric tractors that will be powered by green energy and that will help us grow the demand for electric batteries. So you may find that, yes, you can attract FDI in areas that are geographically not included, but it's a different type of FDI. And it's a different type of interrogation, and it may not be special economic zones, it may be aggregation of inputs, it may be something else. And lastly, still on the structural side of things, if you look at the if you look at the problems that we are seeing of, okay, investments, when they are registered, they promise certain things, down the line, other things happen. I think we have to move towards industrial policy making that is beyond investment promotion, but is looking at how the FDIs that are coming in can be more sustainable. And for me, when I was listening to the chief economist, he was talking about the investment committee that is, and I think it is where in Rwanda where we may need to work a bit more in a sense that we're very good at attracting and very good at facilitating. And by the way, FDIs are not coming because of incentives. I think everyone has to understand this. Like the report pointed out, Rwanda is very good at the governance indicators, and this is primarily the reason why FDI is coming. The content of the incentive is really not the reason why, simply because no amount of incentive could compensate for the market size, could compensate for the logistics costs, no amount of incentives. So it's the quality of governance. And I think where the quality of governance could be even more helpful is in the industrial policy making. At least that's what we are pushing for in the automotive sector. We believe that the time has come for an automotive policy across Africa. We believe that with the CFTA, there is finally a market size for cars that can sustain a local manufacturing capacity. And we believe that with the transition towards green powertrain, there is an opportunity for Africa to even participate in the value chain. But that is no longer FDI attraction. That is serious 10, 20 years debate on how all government sectors can work. Fortunately, in Rwanda, we have a very good blueprint. If you see the pace at which government has coordinated with BioNTech, with the EU, to put in place testing facilities, to upskill the FDA. We need similar things to happen in other sectors. Sometimes the FDA will not come because there is no testing center, you cannot homologate new technology, etc. So I think in terms of inclusiveness, and I would define inclusiveness also in terms of sustainability, sustainable jobs, this could be a homework to address. And I'm sure that we could continue to create quality of jobs with industrial policy making. And Rwanda has quite a challenge. We are, yes, in a CFTA with the EAC, but we also have an opportunity because most of the times we are able to implement things fast. And I think it's a window of opportunity which we need to seize. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Serge. I think it's really important here. I think you rightly said that inclusiveness also implies sustainability of jobs. And the fact for us from the World Bank is that we also look at not just more jobs, but better jobs, better skilled, better paying jobs for the transformation to take place. And I well understand your point on, how we can leapfrog into another paradigm shift. With that, let me turn to Delphine and sort of picking up a bit on, what you said that attracting FDI remains a priority in Rwanda. But the report highlights that FDI firms tend to locate in Kigali and poorer districts, and this is something which just now we also heard from Serge. From your perspective, what can be done to encourage FDI in other than the usual areas, that is in Kigali and the lesser poorer districts, to sort of move out a bit and Are there any successful projects or experiences that you could share from FDI in those areas from your perspective that you have? And very well understand his point on market size, logistics, and skilling, but beyond that, what could be done? Because the report does show that there is a kind of correlation with, FDI going to a particular area and reduction in poverty, although you can't have a one-on-one causality, but some correlation. So look to hear from you.
Thank you, Abba. When I was coming up here, I thought I had the easiest question because of Peace and Roland's remarks. But following Serge, I'm a bit intimidated now. So what more can be done? I think in terms of, first I'll talk in terms of the whole government and then specifically for RDB. We've talked about creation of special economic zones and industrial parks, and of course infrastructure development. I think it's just accelerating these efforts and trying to catch up with what was happening pre-pandemic, because there's a need, of course, to continue with road connectivity to ease the logistic issues, but also to increase internal connection in the country and to increase trade. Also, in terms of utility connections, efforts from our ministry with network connectivity and network readiness, water connectivity, and of course, mainly electricity. We had the Rwanda Universal Electricity Access Program, which aimed for Rwanda to be 100% electrified by 2024. Let us know if we're still on track. But those kinds of efforts are going to see more FDI going outside of Kigali because just like people, businesses establish where in areas that allow them to access basic needs. Now, in terms of looking beyond that, we have identified secondary cities, which some of them are unfortunately are not attracting a lot of FDI as of today, but have high poverty rates as Peace presented. So there's a need to accelerate the development of these secondary cities and developing beyond infrastructure development, which is the school systems, healthcare, thinking about the people, because once a city is lively and a city has entertainment, better schooling, better healthcare, then people are less, I guess, intimidated or scared to live in those cities, which then pulls skilled workforce in those cities, and that availability will encourage FDI to move to those areas and those districts. Also, now in terms of RDB, this report, when we started working with the World Bank, I kept telling the team that this report is coming at a timely manner because of the conversations that we were having internally. We were asking ourselves, how can we best measure actualized investments and job creations? How can we better monitor investors to ensure that they are realizing what they committed to registering, but also for us to understand if the incentives that we have provided are helpful to them, or if they are being abused in any way, or if we need to rethink our incentives and therefore amend some of our policies and regulations. So, of course, as the report recommended, better monitoring is needed. Our aftercare team does a great job, but now we are upgrading our customer relationship management system to ensure that we're able to monitor the whole investor journey from the first time that an investor shows interest to investing in Rwanda to when they actually start operating and beyond. What that will enable us to do is to have data showing first, when an investor first wanted to come to Rwanda, what were they interested in, what sectors, what did they want to do? Then when they chose to register, what did they do? What is their project about? What is their company going to do? And then further on, what services do they require? What incentives do they require? And as they start operating, we are going to have systems and mechanisms such as surveys, whether they're biannual or annual surveys, continued site visits, to collect their performance, the progress of their performance, but also any issues that they might be experiencing. And this, over time, this data is going to be very rich for us because we can not only approach investors for reinvestment, for reinvestment opportunities. Let's say if they came and they were interested in 3 sectors but are now operating in one of them, then you can approach them to invest in the other sectors and beyond. And then another one for us is targeted investment promotion. And this is why this report on inclusive FDI was very important for us, is what more can we look for when we are setting our targets as RDB and when we are attracting investors. We primarily today focus on job creation and of course FDI value. But now we are as Honorable Minister said, decent jobs matter. So we are having conversations on how to change agreements that we sign with investors and request for inclusive aspects, percentage of jobs for youth, percentage of jobs for women, include aspects on a fixed minimum wage. So we know that Rwandans are going to be paid fairly and they're going to get decent jobs. So these are all conversations on the reforms we need to make internally to ensure that FDI is inclusive and it's more impactful. But also beyond that, in targeted investment promotion, we're also asking ourselves, how can we create innovative new opportunities by first understanding the comparative advantage of these peripheral districts. So if outside of Kigali and Bugesera and surrounding districts, what is a district rich in terms of resources or in terms of interest of the people that can be leveraged and supported, and then new opportunities can come in with FDI partners and the government and development partners to then grow that district into a sectoral or like a cluster city, the same way Detroit is an automotive city, and there are some medical cities in the US, the Silicon Valley, and so on and so forth. So that's also something that we're working on, to be more targeted, to understand the comparative advantage of some cities and districts. Some provinces are by the lake. How can we encourage aquaculture investment that can also impact low-skilled labor and can ensure continuous job creation? And lastly, of course, RDB is also mandated with skills development. And as Serge rightfully pointed out, skills and talent is a constraint for the private sector and for FDI. And we believe by increasing the sector skill councils, by encouraging more partnerships with the universities and upskilling programs, international acclaim programs, and also encouraging apprenticeships. Part of the CSR we can request from our investors that we've been discussing is internships and apprenticeships, and creating some sort of incentive or reward, so to speak, for investors to do talent development and skill development. So we also believe upskilling and continuing to develop the young people that are coming into the workforce is also going to impact and encourage FDI to go beyond, because we're not just looking at Kigali. So some of these sector skill councils are definitely out of Kigali. and also other programs like Hunger Pitch Face that encourage innovation, which is also another element of skills development, is also a national program. So I think all those efforts will go a long way in delivering different results. So the next economic update in the next 5 years will show different numbers. In terms of projects that I can think of in other areas outside of Kigali, we have many, mainly in the energy and manufacturing and agriculture sector. So in agriculture, we have Kivu Choice, which is a company that acquired Chimembe Fish Farm in Nyamasheke, and they are in aquaculture. And they're doing a great job right now. It was an investment of over $20 million that will go in that community, so that's going to be impactful. We have the Rusizi hydropower plant, which is going to be in development in partnership with development partners like ADB and EIB and private sector partners. And this project is going to benefit not only Rwanda, but also Burundi and DRC. We have another project like GasMed, which is in Rubavu, and it's in the business of extraction and processing methane gas from Lake Kivu, and turning it into natural gases. And we have an upcoming cement manufacturing plant in Muhanga, industrial park called Angia, and putting up cement grinding station. But beyond those kind of projects, we also have impactful projects that some have been ongoing for quite a few years, and others are starting, and these are targeted for the development and the empowerment of women and youth. Notably, we can talk about Abahizi, which started as a cooperation in Goma, and today is a community benefit company. And they're in the business of manufacturing Kate Spade and Coach handbags, and then exporting them to the US. And then you have the Tony football program that is upcoming, and in partnership with the government of Rwanda and private primary schools, they're going to develop football programs and development programs using football as a source of development. And sorry. And lastly, of course, we have the East African University that is in Nyagatare, and there are many more that I could mention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delphine. That was really comprehensive. And I really like the way you sort of divided up the upskilling, the talent part of it, the development part of it on the supply side. And then there's the other incentives. And you used a lot of I's, and I really want to summarize that for everyone. She talked about, how we can have good incentives and how we could do the investor journey. Like when the investor comes in, how do you monitor that so that you could have, good investment promotion, you could have inclusive FDI, you could have impactful FDI, and also the innovations, picking up, where's the comparative advantage or the niche that you could develop in a particular area. And I think that's really key. With that, let me turn to Zanu. Zanu, the report says that manufacturing sector accounts for the lion's share of jobs which are created directly by FDI firms in the long term. How does IFC help developing countries, including Rwanda, to prioritize sectors that are more inclusive?
Thank you very much, but I can't resist the temptation to also spend a minute on this, the issue which Sevgi started and which she was also covering. Am I surprised that most of the companies are located in Kigali? Of course not. Can more be done? Yes, can be. Yes, it can be. And why are companies coming to Kigali? We all know that when we look at factors of production which companies consider, like market size, presence of labor, government, etc., all those things influence the decisions which investors make. Now, many of you would know that IFC is part of the World Bank Group, or the private sector arm of the group, and we focus on working with the private sector. And in each country, the bank, what we do is we enter into a country partnership framework or strategy with the country. And for IFC, what we do is we actually do a private sector diagnostics, which then informs some of our strategies. So, for example, for Rwanda, our strategy for private sector investments revolve around agriculture, tourism, construction, manufacturing, and IT. Now, what we've done as IFC, we've moved beyond just talking about inclusiveness. We've now mainstreamed inclusiveness. So what we do, for example, if we're giving a loan to a manufacturing company, we agree on specific targets in terms of what they're going to do on inclusiveness. We agree, for example, on the number of women whom they're going to employ. We agree, for example, on the training programs which they're going to institute for women and the youth. And we also agree with them upfront in terms of the number of small businesses which they're going to work with. We also agree we've got a very specific target, what we call local purchases. How much are you going to spend, for example, on local purchases? And we found that to be very effective because it then drives the strategy of the company, and we monitor that every year. And what we've also done is to incentivize companies to mainstream inclusiveness, gender, and so on. How do we do that? We provide concessional financing. If you are doing some of these good things, we will provide you concessional financing. And we found that to be very effective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zano. So let me ask if there are questions from the audience. I think you have to mic somewhere. Yeah, please. Maybe you need to come to the microphone and just introduce yourself, the institution you represent, and a short question. So perhaps we can collect a few. There's this gentleman right here. Would you like to? Here, please. Yeah, this gentleman right here. Please introduce yourself, the institution you represent, and a short question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, I will try to have a short question. Yeah, I'm Joseph. Yeah? Yeah, they're laughing because they know me. So, yeah, so I'm Joseph Ngurunziza. I'm the executive director of Neves Again Rwanda, but also the chairperson of the Rwanda Civil Society platform. So we guys from the civil society, we tend not to have short questions. First of all, I appreciate the good work that the World Bank has done. Of course, the World Bank works with the government to try and improve our economy. So when the minister was in her opening remarks, she shared the ambitious goal that the government had in 7 years of having almost 1.5 million jobs, which means 214,286 jobs per year. But when Peace was presenting the report, when the key takeaway was that FDI is a source of net job creation, both directly and indirectly. But in order to be able to create jobs, to achieve the ambitious plan of 1.5 in 7 years, which 7 years are ending next year, we need to invest in small and medium enterprises. So my question goes to both Dr. Patrick and Thierry, the government economists, because you work with the World Bank. So in order to boost the SMEs, there is a need to increase access to capital, technology transfer, increased market access, improved supply chain. How are you trying to work with the World Bank to see that the FDA can be able to boost the SMEs? I didn't see this within the recommendations. But not forgetting that these SMEs have these challenges. They lack collateral, access to credits, high interest rates. So, and the small and medium enterprises offer the majority of jobs. You even saw that during COVID. Majority of them closed due to lack of capital, and they couldn't access the Economic Recovery Fund because of financial illiteracy. So let's try to be a bit practical. So I would appreciate if you could have, I'm not an economist, so if I become irrelevant, you should excuse me, but how can we support the SMEs to be able to create the 241,000 jobs per year? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. I think there is a lady at the back there and another lady here on the second row. Please, go ahead. Yeah.
I have a couple of comments.
Please tell us your name and the institution you represent.
My name is Fred Kwashi, part-time advisor in Minikufin. Yeah. I have two comments to make. One, to complement what Patrick said about the decline in the debt situation. Well, it's partly due to the base effect. I mean, you have a high GDP growth and high deflator, so the nominal goes up. And when the nominal goes up, of course, it affects the base. So but in reality, there is a slight decline in the debt GDP ratio, so that's a point of correction. My major comment is about FDI and the taxable base. The FDI and the impact on the taxable base. This, I would like to say a few words about the structure of the budget financing and also of central bank's reserves. For close to 2 decades, the central government budget has been financed largely by concessional finance, namely grants and MFI disbursement, concessional finance. That allowed the government to expand the expenditures to develop the country. In the last couple of years, there has been a sharp decline in concessional finance. For example, grants have declined from close to 6-7% of GDP some 15 years ago to now only 0.4% of GDP. So there is a serious challenge to financing of the budget. Therefore, the fiscal consolidation policy will have 3 components: increasing revenue, reprioritization of expenditures, and also other finance of the deficit. That is the new structure of government finance in this country, and by implication also the reserves of the central bank. This is something that has to be taken into consideration for the medium to long-term structural policies of the country. It is therefore important that going forward, FDIs will become a very important source of financing of economic activity. But on the other hand, there is the implication of impact on revenue collection, because invariably, a lot of the FDIs would demand exemptions from payment of revenue. So you have, therefore, this issue there of improving or increasing FDIs, but on the other hand, it has an impact on the revenue base. So how do you balance this, the two aspects? This is a challenge to not only the government, but particularly IDB, because the IDB, invariably, all these investors will go to IDB and ask for exemptions. They must know that by granting them the exemptions, it have an impact on revenue, domestic revenue collection. But in the fiscal consolidation policy, there is the aspect of increasing revenue. So you have these conflicting things that have to be balanced, and I think that it's a big challenge for the government going forward. There's no doubt that given the decline in concessional finance, finance of economic activity in the country will increasingly rely on what we call unrequired transfers, which is FDIs, including, and other activities. I think these are the comments that I wanted to make.
Thank you. So we have a lady there in pink and another lady here. So maybe we take the first round of 4 questions, and I do need to check with Roland if we can go beyond 5 p.m. We are already beyond. Okay, yeah. Maybe this round of questions and then we'll wrap up. And in the meanwhile, my team could just check if there are any online questions. Please go ahead.
Should I go on?
Yes.
My name is Lilian Sengyumva. I am the Partnerships Manager at Resonet. And I wanted to comment on 3 things. One is, for us, we've been working with KedSped New York, and we have a partnership to empower the women they work with at our Hizi, and we've seen how it really, really increased the productivity on the bags they manufacture here in Rwanda. And the first question would be to RDB, how can we support you to work with other investors? Because we have that experience in empowering the labor market through different leadership workshops. And then on the side, I'm a real estate consultant, and I work with different investors who are foreigners. And I've recently hosted a real estate talk where I had so many investors in the room. And one thing they were really commenting on is our platform where they can share their feedback especially to RDB. And I was wondering how we can work together to find a way to help those investors to give us feedback, as we have so many people in the room. Many people are saying, Rwanda is my second home. All I need is to see how I can work together with the government to give them feedback on things that are hindering my investments, which I think is a really good room for us to keep improving the FDI, enabling the environment. The second comment would be on the internet providers, because some people would like to go outside Kigali, but in some places they can't access internet. So as we are working on electricity, working on that also, how can we work with internet providers to improve also the accessibility in all areas outside Kigali? The last comment will be on the certification, as the CEO of Volkswagen said. For some people, we want to volunteer to do capacity building. For example, for me in real estate, I would like to do volunteerism to help some experts, because investors come and they have challenge to speak or to have a conducive process while they're investing, because some people are not, do not have that capacity to help them in the process. So I was wondering, especially to the RDB, someone who wants to volunteer in doing capacity building for people, how can we collaborate? And certification process, how can we also have skilled people in different fields? Those were my comments and recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as people come together for their answers, there's one comment that we received online, which is that there's been a request for deeper analysis on why FDI jobs pay higher and are of good quality compared to local companies. So perhaps the panel can comment on that as well. And just a reminder, we're coming towards the end of the session. So if just introduce yourself and please provide one question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Josephine Mariale Ulimwengu. I'm the head of the Office of the UN Resident Coordinator. I had 2 questions. One, Joseph.
Sorry, just if we could just have one question. We're just coming to the end. Thank you.
Okay. It's short ones, because the first one was already asked by Joseph.
Okay, great.
And so for me, it's really encouraged the linkage between FDI and MSMEs. The second question is, I saw the in the presentation, countries of origins from Africa, they read number 4, starts from number 4. And then there is a reference to the leveraging on African continental free trade here. So my suggestion is really to expand that recommendation on encouraging linkages between FDI and domestic suppliers to include the FCFTA to accelerate the implementation of the FCFTA.
Thank you so much, Madam, and especially for making it so crisp and clear. Thank you. So let me do one thing. I think basically there was one question on how to support SMEs. So perhaps we can have a quick response on that one. There was one on the balance between, say, tax exemptions, which FDI will want, and the challenge of wanting more revenue going forward because of fiscal consolidation. So maybe, Patrick, you could take that. On the SME question, maybe Zano and perhaps Thierry could answer a bit on that. And for the lady there at the back, I think it would be great if she meets bilaterally with RDB on the issues of offering things. And I really liked her idea of having an open platform where you could get feedback from providers and investors who come in. I'm pretty sure it's there, but perhaps since she didn't seem to know, so we can make it more public. And that we can probably meet bilaterally at coffee, because we will be having coffee afterwards. With that, over to you, people, for the answers. Patrick.
Thank you so much. Maybe just, I think Fred's question, Fred was actually commenting, not asking, because he's part of us. So, yeah. So anyway, just to give a very quick reflection on that, my colleague here said clearly that FDIs are not necessarily attracted by tax incentives. They are attracted by the overall business environment in which the government or the fiscal policy has a key role to play. They talked about, for example, human capital accumulation, investment in human capital in schools and learning and things like that, and other aspects or other components of business environment that are very, very important. And that is usually the role, because of the public good nature of them, that is usually the role of the government to invest in. So that creates then a problem of knowing, how or where will the government get resources to invest in such business enabling environment, while or in spite of leakages of revenues that are going to tax incentives. So the equation here is to balance, to see how can we ensure that tax incentives are better targeted to reach out to those sectors and subsectors that are really constrained by tax issues, and also to, on the government side, to invest more in business enabling environment. Also to give, again, a general reflection on what has been said, I think the promotion of private sector-led economic diversification is very key to achieve most of these challenges that we were talking about here, by providing more opportunities under, for example, the FCTAs and other facilities, for example, by promoting these logistical hub strategies and things like that. I think it is going to be very, very important going forward, in addition, of course, to massive investment in human capital. As you know, the government is subsidizing more than the school feeding programs to increase school attendance, and with the help of development partners also we are doing other more targeted interventions. Lastly, something not to forget about is social protection. Those that are excluded, where we are busy discussing on where they should be, but where they are now is also something key to look at. And and I think lots of measures are being put in place to ensure that our social safety net systems are enhanced. We have better targeting of social protection programs and things like that. And it is through those strategies that overall we are going to support an environment in which the private sector can grow. There's also a question on the question that was asked by a colleague here. What is it that the government and the development partners doing as part of leveraging the growth of SMEs to be able to provide jobs and things like that? I think we have several programs. You can approach us and we'll show you quite a number of programs, massive programs with the World Bank, some programs with other development partners as well that will eventually yield into the growth of SMEs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would just a very quick response if anyone wants, because I've really badly managed the time and we are running over. So if you have a short 10, 20, 30 seconds, please go ahead.
I don't know if that's working. Okay. If I can say just add a bit on the question of Joseph. SMEs, access to capital, among others, there are other issues, but when you talk about access to capital and high interest rates, it has to be linked to both sides. How first banks and financial institutions rate the risk they are facing while lending to SMEs. That's one. And the second, you have also SMEs' ability to bring collateral and SMEs' financial education in general. That's what you talked about. So beyond the other programs that I think Patrick was talking about, there are programs, you talked about ERF. Actually, to give you maybe one hint on the ERF and the reason why some of them were not able to access the first ERF. One condition was to bring the proof that you've been affected by COVID. For this, you need to bring your EBM, right? So now you see where I'm coming from. So first, there's also an issue on the side of the SMEs themselves, who a lot of them stay informal and should actually see the benefits to come in the formal sector, so the benefits from program from like ERF. But putting ERF aside, there's a lot that's being done in terms of financial education, at least by the National Bank of Rwanda. We have a new department in charge of financial sector development, and there's a whole financial education strategy, which we work with different institutions, going and explain to people what does it mean, to access a loan, how do you prepare, and various such education programs. So we think that with time, with information, SMEs, especially outside Kigali, and those in the informal sector might have better information to come and access some of these financing. Let me stop here.
Thank you. I think Zano wants to say the last, and that's very short. Yeah, thank you.
Just briefly, I think to me the key is, and I've gone to so many conferences, I've worked in about 10 countries in Africa, is the same issue when it comes to SMEs. The key is how do we move them from being informal businesses to formal? And that has got spin-off benefits, both in terms of government, they become taxable, but more importantly, because they start running their business a bit professional and therefore eligible for access to loans and so on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know there are many questions there and we haven't answered all, and in particular, the online question on deeper analysis for FDI, I would urge Peace and Calvin to work more on that. Also, Josephine's point on including AFCTA on the recommendations, so please take that on board. With that, I thank the panel for a very interactive and very useful and insightful discussion. Also, the audience for their questions. And with that, turn over to Roland for her concluding remarks. Thank you very much. A round of applause to the panelists.
It's always very exciting to me when we run over time, because it means that there was a great deal of content. But I know that some of you leave somewhat dissatisfied. That's actually, for me, one of the benefits, I feel, of us now being able to be in person, because hopefully as we go to collect some snacks and drinks, we'll have the opportunity to engage directly with some of our panelists. I would like to thank our panelists, each and every one, for their insightful comments, for their depth and breadth of their experience that they've shared with us today. Of course, my strongest and most heartfelt thanks goes to the minister, who not only came, made the keynote address, but stayed and chatted with me as we, throughout the whole event, as we saw and heard the discussion unfold. I would also like, of course, to thank my team, who has been working and collaborating across the board with a number of different institutions in order to bring you this very rich analysis. Our view with the REU is that it's about public awareness. It's about starting a discussion, not just with government. Somebody says the World Bank works with government, but we work with all actors. We work with the private sector. We also work with civil society. We work with academia. And we put these reports out and this analytical work in order to start the discussion, to start the conversation. And many of the issues, I think, were raised, and new issues were raised even at the panel. We hope that these discussions continue. So today, we effectively discussed quality of jobs in Rwanda. How can foreign direct investment accelerate poverty reduction? We should have some ideas about that at the end of the discussion today. What can we do to promote employment for youth and women in Rwanda? A lot of ideas came to the fore as well. I saw a tension, and I like that in the discussion where Serge mentions, do we really need incentives? In fact, I don't think that's why investors are here. Delphine didn't speak to it, but I know that the RDB believes that we need incentives, and that some of those incentives are about, as one of our speakers mentioned, as one of our audience members mentioned, essentially those incentives are about collecting less taxes because you have certain exclusions that are offered to sweeten the pot for investors to come. So there are many trade-offs. Governing is not easy, which is always the conclusion I come to when we get to the end of the Rwanda economic update. We have put some suggestions on the floor, and there's a lot more to discuss. I think it's also an important point I'd wish to raise. Joseph, you asked a comment on SMEs. You spoke about access to finance. At the very end of my opening remarks, I had mentioned 2 areas in which we were working with government on access to finance, specifically in the agriculture sector, and then more broadly in the capitalization of the ERF, which Thierry referred to. I cannot speak, of course, for the government of Rwanda, and I wouldn't expect to or hope to, but my experience has been that there's a great deal of focus on this particular issue, and this is what has amounted to over $500 million in financing between those 2 operations, not all of it going to access to finance, but all of it having a significant focus on how it is that we create better opportunities for SMEs and medium-sized businesses to be able to access finance. So it's great that you're raising it, but I would say that not only is the government concerned about it, but the bank is also actively working with government to try to address what you have identified is a real challenge. Lastly, I would like to thank all of you in the room and the many of you online. I understand that there were over 210 persons who joined us online today. This is very, very exciting for me. The very first one of these we did, it was COVID. I think we had 80 people online. We were very excited to have 80 people. Now, the idea that we're reaching about 350 people with this publication is really fantastic. And, as I'm wrapping up my time in Rwanda, I can say that one of the things that we're very proud of is this Rwanda economic update. We hope to be relevant. We hope to continue to raise issues and to raise public awareness about issues and policies that are important for the government and the people of Rwanda. So thank you very much for being here, and let's look forward to the Rwanda Economic Update 22. Take good care.
Thank you so much, Roland. And as we come to the end of this exciting event, I hope you have all learned something new, and I hope you'll continue to stay here, continue the discussion just outside. On behalf of all the stakeholders, Roland, we would like to thank you for all your hard work with the Rwanda Economic Update, for this particular one, but as your final one, we're incredibly grateful and we wish you all the best in your next endeavours. So a big round of applause to you, Roland. Let us carry forward the knowledge from today. Please feel free to scan the code, download, tweet it, hashtag Rwanda Economic Update. We wish you all the best and we look forward to seeing you at the next update. Murakoze cyane musamweza.